will not continue.
Oh, I agree with you, but I see no possibility that they don't try to stabilize the U.S.
No, but I think that I mean, I don't expect this president to do it.
Oh, that's.
But I expect.
That's a different.
But I expect the next president to do it, because otherwise, the system will not continue. There will be a different system that will emerge, and I think the United States will not have the kind of influence that it has now.
I have the sense from reading, one of the most fascinating parts of your book was actually the real-time high finance chapter. Yeah. And I have the sense from the last entry that I saw there that you must have lost a little bit of money with the dollar. You know? So probably it is again, you're hoping for this to end, but somehow...
No, I think basically, to bring it up to date, I made two mistakes. I thought that the periphery would be actually more unscathed than it turned out.
You were almost right.
And actually, the Chinese and the Indian market went down a lot more than ours. So I had to run awfully fast to stay more or less in the same place to make up for that mistake. And also the strength of the recent strength of the dollar took some adjustment that also cost money.
But I think the recent strength of the dollar is, you just described it. I think you described it very well. No? It's the fact that you're trying to save the center before the periphery will naturally stabilize the dollar.
But I think that the strength of the dollar today is like to me...
Vis-a-vis what?
Vis-a-vis the strength of the dollar now.
Yeah, but the dollar relative to what?
To all the other currencies except the yen. Except the yen. Yeah. The yen is even stronger than the dollar, and of course yields even less than the dollar. But other than that, against the euro, but particularly the periphery currencies. So you had the Eastern European members of the European Union in deep trouble, the Asian countries, and of course Brazil, that had been the great beneficiary of the commodities bubble. Incidentally, that's another very interesting thing which happened since I wrote the book, that you actually had the rise in commodities eventually have ended in a bubble. Yes. And you did have a total boom-bust sequence, for instance, in oil going from $70 to $140, back to
put the money for a while.
Right. So because people were fleeing from the dollar, and the other currencies weren't that attractive, so there was a flight to commodities. Yes. And that created the commodities bubble, which has now also collapsed.
So let me take you back to the crisis, the domestic crisis, and in particular to the real estate crisis. So what happened there? Can you explain us sort of the connection between real estate prices, MBS, CDOs, and then...
well, you had a well-established fact that Greenspan kept interest rates too low too long. It's now even he has recognized that this was a mistake. So that was one of the starting points.
Did he recognize that? I think he recognized that he did not regulate, or he trusted the financial markets too much, but I'm not sure
well, maybe
he has considered the interest rate.
Maybe not. At any rate, that was one factor. So you had this generated housing, demand for housing. Then you had the securitization of mortgages, and the various synthetic instruments which did not take into account the effect that securitization and the use of synthetic instruments would have on housing prices. It didn't take into effect their own influence on the market. which created a new situation.
Well,
So,
vice versa, I would argue. And vice versa, I would argue. They did not take into account the effect of the declining housing prices on the whole, and the value of the entire asset
right.
class. No?
So you had double-digit growth in housing, and this misconception that the value of houses is independent of the willingness to lend. So with the increase in the value of collateral, there's more and more use of leverage, and the increased willingness to lend with the experience of practically no defaults, people became very loose in their lending habits. And so, and then you had this idea that you can actually reduce risk by geographic diversification. In actual fact, you increased risk by separating the agent from the principal. The agent who was creating the mortgages and the principal that was owning the mortgages. The agent was interested in earning fees and did not have the interests of the mortgage owner at heart, because he had no financial interest, because securitization allowed him to get rid of the obligation. He didn't own it, separating the agent from the thing. That led to the bubble. And the really interesting thing is that when you take socialism, but Marxist ideology, basically wonderful understanding of global capitalism that Marx was capable of, he made one mistake. He didn't understand the agent principal problem. Mm-hmm. So by nationalizing everything, he forgot that the people who run the country won't have the interest of the people at heart, but will do things for their own thing. And market fundamentalism came a cropper on the same agent principle problem as Marxism. I think that's where the two ideologies meet. I find that rather fascinating.
Yes. And why did it break?
Well?
Why did it break?
Why did it break?
Yeah,
well, because it became unsustainable. Now,
so what is unsustainable? Do you think that 70% of home ownership is just not sustainable? It's not a...
No, it's that you could in the end borrow over 100% of the inflated value of houses with no security.
But that's what you need to do if you want to have 70. That's what you need to do if you want 70% of people to own a home.
Yes, and of course the people who got hurt are the recent. The people less qualified to own houses. So it's really the minorities, the old people and black and Hispanic populations who got really hurt. Pardon?
What do we do about that?
Well, we must actually do something about it, which hasn't been done. I mean, you have to downsize the mortgages to the current value. In other words, unless you do that, within a year or so, about more than 20 million households would have mortgages whose value exceeds the house. You have to eliminate, and then with unemployment, people would start walking away from their homes. And when that becomes socially acceptable, you would have a real...
Well, it's already happening in some pockets. No?
It's beginning. So you have to downsize the mortgages to reduce the principal to 80% of the current value of the homes. And then maybe house prices might drop another 10%, but you still have